Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Today I'd like to share with you a relatively new knife from Spyderco. This is the Manix 2 Lightweight with the gray FRCP handles and the Maxamet steel. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the knife. Now I'm not going to go into great detail about the knife in general because besides the different handle color and the steel, this is the exact same knife that we've seen before in things like translucent BD1 and in the S110V version with the darker blue handles. So we're going to spend most of this video talking about the steel, a little bit about its composition, some of my sharpening experience, and just kind of what I think about Maxamet steel in general. So I thought my steel chart here from Spyderco would be appropriate for this video. We may reference it a little bit as we're going through talking about some of the different elements in the alloy and things that make Maxamet a little bit unique and different compared to some other steels that we've seen before. So as with some other knives we've seen from Spyderco, they ship this with a desiccant bag, which lets us know that this steel is not stainless, so it will rust on you, and that is certainly the case. So it only has about 4.75% chromium, so well below 12% minimum, as to what we see with a true stainless knife. So I think Spyderco does a really nice job here, including this little pamphlet here, talking about Maxamet steel. Just talking about how it is a powdered metallurgy steel from Carpenter, and just some of the different attributes about the steel in terms of it being a very hard, high-speed steel that was actually developed to use in the steel rollers that are used to roll out sheet steel, which is kind of ironic, right? And they go on to talk about some other things about how they've done some in-house testing. And, it's basically has proven itself a very strong competitor against some of the top steels that we see today. So something that's very cool here is that Spyderco also includes this little chemical composition chart here, talking about some of the different key alloys within the steel. So we'll just quickly go through some of these. So we have about 2% carbon, again 4.75% chromium. And something that's kind of unique about this steel, it has a lot of tungsten and a lot of cobalt, and kind of a moderate amount of vanadium, which is something that we don't always quite see with a high wear resistant steel. We're used to seeing some higher vanadium levels. So for comparison, things like S110V have about 9% vanadium. But we have some, different elements here in the steel. So tungsten kind of helps with the overall hardness of the steel, toughness. I will mention, though, that I believe some of the tungsten will form some carbides during the heat process, will give the steel a little bit of wear resistance. You guys have heard about tungsten carbide. It's, used in a lot of industrial applications in terms of being pretty wear resistant. But I will point out that tungsten carbide is not as hard as vanadium carbide. So vanadium carbides are well over 90 in the Rockwell hardness scale, and I believe tungsten carbides are somewhere around the mid-80s. So, they're both very hard, but, vanadium is a little bit harder element than tungsten is. And again, we have some cobalt in there, which, helps with overall strength and some hardenability, given the high, Rockwell hardness on Maxamet steel. So I think we can go talk about that here real quickly. So I put this over here. Let's open the blade up here and take a look at it real quick for those of you guys who haven't seen this before. So it has a very nice kind of light gray FRCP handle here. Spyderco has done a really nice kind of stone wash on the finish of this blade, if you guys can see that there, which I think is a pretty smart move. Given that this steel is not stainless, it will patina and get some, marks on it over time. So the stone washing will kind of help conceal, some of that discoloration that may occur, as you use the knife. So something that I thought that was kind of interesting on this knife is that with the jimping here on the spine and the choil, it's kind of rounded, which leads me to believe that Spyderco stone washed this jimping. So basically the jimping was cut and then the blade was stone washed after, which kind of gives everything a little bit of a rounded appearance and feel. Doesn't really change the function of the jimping too much. It is a little bit smoother than Spyderco's traditional sharp jimping. So I don't know, it's kind of interesting. I guess from a cost perspective, that was the the way for them to go with this knife, to meet budget costs and things like that, which I want to talk a little bit about later. So what are my overall thoughts about Maxamet as a steel? So Maxamet is a very hard steel. It has a Rockwell hardness of about 67 to 68, which is amongst the hardest that we've seen from any production knives, or really any knife steel. I mean, getting close to 70 is pretty unheard of. So for just comparison, Spyderco's S110V is in about the 62 to 63 range. So this is quite a bit harder than S110V. Some people had some concerns about the overall durability and strength of this steel. Would it easily chip? Would it hold up? Things like that. And this particular knife was lent to me by a friend in the Spyderco group on Facebook. Check them out if you're into Spyderco knives. He had this knife for just a few days, and unfortunately he dropped the knife and chipped the tip pretty bad, and it held up surprisingly well given the hardness of the steel. So I went ahead and sharpened this and fixed it up there for him. But I think given the hardness here of this steel, 67, 68, and it took an impact really quite well. So I really don't think the high hardness is going to be too much of an issue for most people with regular use, EDC use. There's some additional information out there also from Jim Ankerson, who he did some testing, I believe, on the Mule in Maxamet steel. And from his results in testing, I don't think he really had any durability issues with that steel either. He goes through a gauntlet of cutting tests with his knives. He cuts cardboard, he cuts wood, I believe he cut some wire, and really, he didn't have any issues with the steel either. So given the high amounts of tungsten and cobalt, I think that really kind of offsets the high hardness of this steel. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this previously, but this is a very high wear resistant steel. In a lot of testing, it outperforms things like S110V, S90V in terms of edge retention. And I believe a lot of that edge retention that this steel gets is a result of its high hardness. So being 67, 68, the harder you make the steel, your edge retention is going to increase. You can see that with various batches of the same steel treated at different hardness levels. If you have S110V hardened to 58 or 59, and you compare that steel hardened to 62 or 63, you're obviously going to get much better edge retention, out of the higher hardness. So I think that's a lot of what we're seeing with Maxamet in terms of where it gets a lot of its edge retention from. Now, I'm not an expert in knife steels like some people are out there, so if I'm incorrect about some of that, please let me know. But I try to follow along, the best I can with a lot of the different things and how steels perform relative to one or the other. So, but yeah, I mean, given the carbon levels and vanadium levels, it's not extraordinary compared to some other steels that we've seen. So, it's interesting nonetheless. So as far as I understand, Maxamet has been used a few times before in a couple of production knives. I believe in the most recent past, Kershaw or ZT used Maxamet in one of their knives, and given the difficulty that they had with the just heat treating and grinding, they basically decided to scrap it. It wasn't worth their time and money. So Spyderco is one of the first companies here to come back with this steel, and they found a way to heat treat it well and to work with it in their factories in terms of just grinding and finishing, things like that. So that's very cool. Spyderco is one of those companies that's always pushing the boundaries of their knife designs, their materials. They're always trying new things, trying to be innovative, and a lot of these things that they come out with carry over into other knives from different companies that we see eventually in the future. I mean, for goodness sake, Spyderco is the first company to put a pocket clip on a knife. And look, pretty much every folding knife you buy now has a pocket clip on it, right? So, they're true innovators within the knife industry. So, I think I'm going to wrap this video up just talking about my experience sharpening this knife. So, again, this knife, was lent to me basically because, I wanted to check out the steel, but it had a broken tip. So, I told my friend, I said, well, if you send it to me, I'll fix the tip for you, and I can do a little review and, get to see the Maxamet steel in person myself. So that's what we did. So this knife was sharpened up to about 600 grit on silica carbide stones, and then was finished on Strops diamond compound, ranging from about 4.5 to 2.5, down to 1, down to half micron, and then 1/4 micron. And the edge that I got from that was a hair whittling edge. And I'll roll some footage in here, just kind of showing the sharpness for you guys, so you can see how this edge came up. So in terms of sharpenability, I would say Maxamet is actually slightly easier to sharpen than S110V, in my experience. Now, I've only sharpened one knife in Maxamet, so I don't have a huge data set to pull from, but just in terms of how the steel felt and how it sharpened, I would say it's definitely in the same ballpark as S110V, perhaps slightly easier to sharpen. I know that may, sound funny, but it doesn't have as much vanadium, in the steel as S110V does. It certainly has a lot less chromium, which doesn't, really affect the sharpenability too much in terms of ease, but it can affect the way, the edge comes up. So, but something I did notice about this steel is that it likes to get very sharp very quickly. So when I was sharpening this knife, it had almost a hair whittling edge after about my 2.5 micron strop. So, comparatively speaking, for me, S110V doesn't really get hair whittling usually until around after, a half micron strop, sometimes a little bit past that. So, to see a steel like this that, gets that sharp that quickly, takes such a keen edge, is really a nice thing. And, I've heard some people talk about how they think that, chromium kind of clogs up the steel, and they don't really like the way that it sharpens and how it takes an edge. And, a lot of the sharpening connoisseurs out there, they prefer knives that have lower chromium content, higher carbon content, things like that. And, I think now I can kind of understand that a little bit in terms of, what they mean when they say, oh, well, I like how this knife sharpens, I like how the edge comes up on it. gets sharp quickly, which is what I saw with this steel. So yeah, it took a hair whittling edge very, very quickly. It definitely is going to take some time to sharpen unless you have silica carbide or diamond stones. You're going to be in for a long sharpening time with this steel if you decide to do that yourself. And I actually would not recommend that you do unless you have something like silica carbide or diamonds, because I have found that on harder steels like this, more wear-resistant steels, the quality of your final edge is somewhat compromised if you're trying to sharpen with something like aluminum oxide or something softer in general. So yeah, really, overall, I think it's a good new steel that Spyderco is working with. I'll be excited to see they have a Native 5 lightweight coming out here pretty soon, and I think I'll most likely pick up one of those. I tend to like the Native design a little bit better than the Manix 2. Manix 2 is a great design. I'm just not too crazy about the ball lock, the cage ball lock. It's I don't know. I just prefer something different, like a simple back lock or compression lock or something like that. So yeah. So overall, I think Maxamet steel is gonna work out really well for most people. I don't think the hardness or chipping is really going to be too much of an issue. I think you will probably see some patina on the steel. So if you cut a lot of wet things or live in a very humid environment, you may see some spotting on the blade. But it should be hidden, kind of by that stone washing there. But otherwise, from what I've seen, this steel performs, a little bit better than S110V. In terms of edge holding and sharpenability. So I'm real excited for this, and I want to use it some more and kind of see how it works out for me in the months to come. So I guess in closing, I'll just mention the price of this knife is a little bit steep. So right now, I think this knife is about $150, $160, which is a good $40, $50 more than the S110V lightweight, which honestly is kind of the reason why I held off on purchasing one of these knives. So for an FRCP handle knife and Maxamet steel for $150, man, that's a lot of money. I mean, I can get a PM2 and S110V with G10 handles for the same price, and in terms of performance, I mean, S110V and Maxamet, they're in the same ballpark. Maxamet's a little bit ahead, in my opinion, but it's not a night and day difference. They're both very, very good steels, with S110V being more stainless. So I don't know, the stone washing on this knife. I don't know if that added much cost to the blade at all. I doubt it did. But I would like to see Spyderco try to reduce the price on this. If they could get this knife in a retail price of around $130, man, that would be a smoking deal, for this particular steel. So, I really don't think the Maxamet steel costs Spyderco a whole lot more money to produce or work with compared to S110V. If I'm a guy, at my house with an Edge Pro Apex, and I can sharpen this steel without a whole lot of problems, Spyderco and their $1 million factory should be able to work with this steel without a whole lot of problems. I understand the heat treat, could be more difficult. It could take more time. Perhaps they have some material loss if the heat treat doesn't go quite right. I understand that. But, in terms of the difference in cost of the steels, I mean, it's pretty much nothing. For example, I was looking at some knife steel for myself at one point in time, from places like Alpha Knife Supply, USA Knife Maker. And, to get a piece of steel, about 3/16 inch thick, maybe, 2 or 3 inches by 12, the difference in price between something like 154 cm and S90V is only like $4 or $5 difference per sheet. It's really not that much. So, a lot of knife makers and companies, I think they've done a good job of selling, super steels to companies, or not to consumers, to make money and profit, and that's great. I mean, that's what they're in business for, is to make money and quality products. But the overall difference in cost to them, I don't think it's that much. So again, I would like to see this knife about $130. I think it would sell a lot better at that price point. So maybe we'll see that, maybe not. But for now, Spyderco is the only production company in the game, with this Maxamet steel. So I think you're kind of paying for the exclusivity, or exclusiveness, I should say, of this steel. So, well, I have managed to hit the 20-minute mark on this video, so it's time to bring this to a close. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and it's fun to see some new stuff here from Spyderco. I know I told you guys that 2017 would be a pretty exciting year, for the knife channel here, and I have some more interesting things coming here in the future. I just got a Para 3 in the mail last week, so that will be coming onto video here pretty soon. So hope everyone's doing well, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.